Hello, and welcome to Binding of Isaac Bootcamp. Today we'll be looking at the 7 Deadly Sin mini-bosses, kicking off straight away with Envy. Envy is a mini-boss who could almost be considered passive in the way he deals damage. Rather than using particular types of attack or abilities against your character, the only way you're going to be hurt by this 7 Sin mini-boss is by running into him. Now whilst that may seem simple to avoid when first coming across this small floating monster, once you start flinging tears his way, that's when you see the real trick to this fight. After Envy has taken a certain amount of damage, he will split into 2 smaller versions of himself, and each of those will split into 2 more upon destruction, and each of the subsequent 2 from that division will also split, resulting in a possible total of 8 small enemies on the screen simultaneously. As Envy's subdivisions become smaller, they also gain a boost in terms of speed, so as you can imagine, having 8 of these little guys bouncing around a small room can be a nightmare to deal with, particularly if you've come into the fight with a low speed stat. The way you generally want to handle this fight is by taking the divisions on one at a time. First split the original Envy into 2, pick one of the 2 smaller versions that spawns and work your way down that way, and only move on to the second head after those have been taken care of. This way the most enemies you'll have on the screen at any one moment will be 4, and not all of them will be the small fast versions of the boss, making the whole ordeal much easier to deal with, having been broken down into bite-sized chunks. Items that can prove to be particularly helpful against this mini-boss are those that can inflict multiple ticks of damage in a single location, such as the Brimstone, or defensive items that rotate around your character, as holding them over Envy or any of his subdivisions will generally result in its destruction, as well as killing whatever it splits into, as they will collide with your defensive item upon spawning. Obviously, using defense items offensively can be risky, as you have to get up close and personal, so you may want to reserve this strategy for items with a bit more distance, such as the attack fly or Forever Alone. However, so long as you don't let the dividing get too out of control, the boss Envy can actually be a pushover, as he travels around the room in a very clear pattern as he bounces off all of the walls, and you can generally work out where he's going to be coming from and how to move out of the way with relative ease. Once Envy is defeated, there are 2 rewards you can get from the fight. One is not so much a reward, but when you've destroyed the final smallest form of Envy, it will spawn a troll bomb upon the point of death. Not exactly great, but it's possible you could use it to blow open a wall to a secret room with a lot of luck and some good positioning. The other reward, which is generally quite a rare drop, is the Shoop de Whoop item. The next of the 7 deadly sins we'll look at is Greed. In all likelihood, Greed is the 7 Sin mini-boss you're going to come across most frequently, as he isn't limited to just spawning within random mini-boss rooms. He can, and generally will, also appear in Sheol, or as an encounter replacing either the item shop or the secret room, which I can tell you has caused me no end of frustration. When I've been dying to spend 15 cents, I finally stumble across the shop and I'm greeted with this guy. Fortunately, there is a trick you can remember which may help you to avoid unnecessary Greed fights, which is that once you've faced a mini-boss on a floor, it is impossible for you to end up fighting another. Therefore, if you face Greed or any of the other 7 Sin mini-bosses on a floor with an item shop, that shop is definitely going to be safe. You can also assess your likelihood of spawning Greed instead of an item shop by looking at how much money you have and the level you are on. The higher both of these values are, the more likely it is you're going to end up facing the boss. Getting onto the facets of the boss itself, Greed's appearance seems to indicate that he was once one of the unfortunate dead shopkeepers who actually survived being hung, shown by the severed noose hanging around his neck. He attacks in 2 different ways, his primary attack being a triple shot in front of him which, if it hits you, will cause you to drop 2 cents, one falling to the ground beside you and the other being lost to you forever. Depending on the amount of money you have on you when being hit, the amount of coins dropped and lost can be scaled up, more money meaning bigger losses. His second ability is one that allows him to spawn 2 hoppers, one on either side of him, and he is capable of doing this multiple times, so you can have a fair amount of these present in the fight if you don't clear them up quickly. The main trick to getting through this fight easily is to take advantage of range. Of course, this runs under the assumption that you have a decent range stat by the time you run across Greed, as without one you're going to have to get much closer, and that means you'll have to be really sharp with your reaction times to dodge between the triple shot, an attack which he doesn't telegraph with any noise or animation, making it easy to quickly lose health to him as well as coins. Any kind of item which renders you invincible for a short period, such as the Book of Shadows or My Little Unicorn, pretty much makes this fight a joke, as Greed isn't particularly resistant to damage, and being able to get up in his face and beat on him with impunity is going to ensure the fight ends relatively quickly. Upon death, Greed will explode in a shower of coins, occasionally dropping 1 or 2 nickels in there as well, so he can be a nice mini-boss to make some money from if you manage to avoid those triple shots. He also has a chance to drop the Steam sale, halving the price of all items in subsequent shops. Next on the list is Lust, a mini-boss who bears a striking resemblance to our old friend Isaac, that is if he were under effects of the virus item, not to mention being recoloured to fluorescent pink. A very simple boss in her method of attack, Lust simply charges after you until you put her down, inflicting damage if she manages to catch up and touch you. This fight is a complete pushover if you have any sort of speed upgrade, and the ability to run faster than Lust pretty much renders her powerless. If you don't have very much speed, however, don't fret because all is not lost. Using the environment to your advantage can still ensure you an easy win. If you have a clump of rocks in the room you fight Lust in, which you generally will as the rooms tend to contain obstacles, you can kite Lust around said rocks, as when you get out of line of sight of Lust, she tends to slow down. So doing this whilst throwing in the opportune shot now and again, you can whittle down her HP and eventually result in a win. Lust also gets faster on later floors and appears to get a slight boost in her AI as she tries to cleverly outmaneuver you by getting ahead of you as you run, but it's not that much of an increase in strategy that it's very much trouble to deal with. When Lust dies, she can drop either the Virus or Roid Rage items, Roid Rage in particular being a great little pickup, and she may also drop a pill. Pride is the next member of the 7 Sin mini-bosses, and has quite a bland, grey, washed out appearance. However, this does change very slightly during the fight in 2 different ways, which are helpful indicators of what attack he is going to use. Pride's first attack, which is clearly telegraphed by his appearance switching out to that of a troll face, results in him spawning 4 bombs around the room, all with lit fuses, which will explode after a short wait. When he uses this attack, you want to mainly just get out of the way of his bombs, but also pay some attention to their position relative to the order they spawned in, as the last to have spawned will be the last to explode, and blasts from other earlier bombs may fling that last bomb in your direction if you don't plan ahead. Also, unfortunately, Pride takes no damage from his own bombs, so don't assume just because he's standing near a bomb that he's going to be taking any damage from it. Pride's second attack is telegraphed by him taking on a Forever Alone face, followed by 4 squiggly lines erupting away from him at each diagonal. This is incredibly easy to avoid if you stand either above or below him, or to either his left or right, and so long as you move to remain this way, you should never be hit by this attack. Upon death, Pride can either drop a Troll Bomb, a Tarot card, or the Anarchist's Cookbook item, which possesses a very similar attack to his Troll Bomb one. Next is Wrath, a mini-boss who draws a great deal of inspiration in terms of his looks, attacks, and the way his room is laid out from the classic series of Bomberman games. Wrath has but one attack, and that is to throw bombs at Isaac, an attack which is generally incredibly easy not to get caught in, provided you can make sure not to back yourself into a closed off area with no escape. This is pretty easy, seeing as Wrath's bombs tend to blow up the environment and provide you with many routes of escape. His bombs can also be kicked right back in his face if you run into them, and unlike Pride, he will take damage from his own attacks. Wrath's movement patterns seem very odd when you fight him, as he has no desire to chase after you like Lust does. He seems to move somewhat independently and simply uses opportunities to attack you when you draw near, rather than actively seeking to cut you off with bombs or anything, making this a very easy fight if you're at least slightly careful, at least up until multiple Wraths start spawning on rooms in the Womb or Sheol, which can be considerably more challenging, but by that point I assume you should be well enough equipped in terms of both skill and items to handle it. If you happen to possess Bobby Bomb Homing Bombs item, Wrath's bombs will actively home in on him, drifting back towards him once he shoots them out, which generally spells an end for his unfortunate little life. Wrath, upon death, will either drop a few bombs, Mr. Mega, or Mr. Boom. Gluttony is our next mini-boss, and is another enemy who possesses 2 attacks, the first being the ability to shoot 8 tiers in all directions around himself, which you should always be able to preempt so that you can step between 2 tiers and avoid taking any damage. His second attack he actually telegraphs by shaking for around half a second, before firing a massive beam across the room in one cardinal direction. This second attack can be very effectively used against him, as goading him into using it is incredibly simple. Standing either above, below, to the left, or to the right of him will nearly always cause him to start shaking, followed by the aforementioned laser beam, and with enough speed you can quickly tempt him to fire in one direction before running to another to unload some of your own attacks against him, as he channels the laser beam for a short while and thus will be unable to respond. Upon death, Gluttony will generally spit out a bunch of hearts, but he can also drop one of 3 items which will give you a nice little health boost, making him a valuable mini-boss to come across. He can either drop the heart, which increases health by 1, the bucket of lard, which increases health by 2 and heals half a heart, but costs some speed, or the raw liver, which also increases health by 2, but this time costs you 1 point's worth of range. Now we come to the final member of the bunch, Sloth, a mini-boss who has a striking likeness to the Globin enemies of the game, but recoloured green. Sloth I would consider to be one of the hardest of the 7 Sin mini-bosses, as making even a little slip-up can easily result in damage, whilst with the other mini-bosses small mistakes tend to be forgiven quite easily. He again possesses 2 attacks, the first being one where he spits up a green ball up into the air, which explodes upon landing and will cause a minimum of 1 heart's worth of damage if it hits you. This attack also leaves a pool of green ooze on the floor on later floors, which can damage your character if stepped in. His second attack is to spawn charges, which like Greed's hoppers can quickly multiply if you don't take them out, and can pose a definite threat as their charging limits where you can move to, which can prove deadly combined with a well-placed toxic green ball. However, once you have Sloth's moves committed to memory, you should fare just fine. Bear in mind that his toxic green ball attack can destroy his pet chargers and also rocks around the room, so you might want to take a moment to goad him into firing one to break open a tinted rock or the entrance to the secret room even, as it will save you wasting one of your own bombs. The best way to deal with Sloth is to take advantage of his toxic green ball attack by using it to destroy his chargers and constantly keep moving in one direction around the boss, as doubling back and forth can easily result in you taking a hit that you didn't see coming that you would have avoided if you just kept moving forward. Upon death, Sloth will generally drop a tarot card, but now and again he will drop an item called Bob's Rotten Head. And that was today's Binding of Isaac bootcamp on the 7 Deadly Sin mini-bosses. I hope that there were some helpful tips and tricks for people in there, and that it maybe even helped people to up their game. See you guys soon.